Okay, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. How you going? My name's Simon from Disability Employment Australia, and welcome to today's webinar, which is titled How to Create Good Jobs for People with a Disability. We'll just wait for the remainder of the group to slowly make their way in. But as you can see on screen, we're joined here by Dr. Elaine Nash from Flinders University and Swinburne University as well. Okay, when we reach 60, I'll do oh, there we go. Okay, so before we get started and we get Elaine to um, start the presentation, I'd like to take this opportunity to do an acknowledgement of country. So Disability Employment Australia acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and acknowledges their continued connection to lands, water, and community. We pay our respects to the people, the cultures, the elders, past, present, and emerging. For those of you who are new to Lunch and Learn sessions are delivered by the Centre for Inclusive Employment and Disability Employment Australia. The Centre supports providers with practical resources, tools, and training to help deliver high quality employment services for people with disability and employers. For those of you who aren't familiar with Disability Employment Australia, we are a national peak body representing disability employment providers. The centre itself is delivered by a national consortium led by the Centre for Social Impact at Swinburne University of Technology, bringing together research, lived experience, and sector expertise. A little bit of housekeeping for today. We've got live captions by Expressions Australia. Liv will provide some details on how to access these in the chat today. If you've got any questions for Dr. Nash during today's session, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom. Today's session will also be recorded and be available to view online in our online hub, along with the slides and a transcript. So in today's session on how to create good jobs for people with a disability, Dr. Elaine Nash from Flinders University and Swinburne University will present the Good Job Creation Matrix, which came out of Dr. Nash's PhD findings. Elaine has a background in social work, having graduated with a Bachelor of Social Work from the University of South Australia. I won't tell them what year you graduated in, Elaine. That'll just be between you and I. Elaine's got over 30 years experience in human services and has spent more than 20 years in operational strategic roles and management roles, primarily in the disability sector. Her PhD research focus was on helping organisations enhance employment opportunities and outcomes for people with a disability, while also having realised significant benefits. So Elaine and I were just having a bit of a chat before we got started. Elaine and I kind of came in contact with each other at the start of Elaine's PhD, and I was privileged enough to play a small role in kind of a supervising committee of that work, which was really interesting work. And I'm so pleased to have Elaine come back and present some of those findings to you all. I hope you find it really, really interesting, which I'm sure you will. Now over to you, Elaine.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'll just get the slides up to share people. That was a lovely introduction, and I really very much appreciate it. And it's nice to spend some time over lunchtime with you all. So as Simon said, the Good Job Creation Matrix came out of the PhD. And I did some research with CEOs and operational managers, including people with intellectual disability as well. The PhD was out of the UniSA Business School, so I was very much taking this business tack, employer tack. And I was looking at what are the things that successful employers do to create successful employment for people with intellectual disability. And when I was bringing the findings together and in my discussions with my principal supervisor, Dr. Basil Tucker, one of the very clear findings was the importance of job carving. And so when I was looking at job carving, I was thinking about, well, is there a tool that I can develop which managers would understand that would enable this job carving process to happen? And job carving can also be called job creation. It's probably something that you're very familiar with, and also role redesign from an employer perspective. And by utilizing some management theory, I came up with a 2 by 2 matrix. And a lot of this presentation is really all about the matrix. And I tested the matrix on a range of people, from employers to operational managers to people who are in the disability sector, and also in executive education classes. So with middle managers and also with MBA students as well, some of them in the HR management world. The testing went extremely well. And later, as I was further developing the matrix, what also became clear was that you can create jobs, but they may not necessarily be good jobs. And so the other thing that I brought in was the 6 dimensions of job quality. So as we move through the presentation, you'll see the matrix, but also the 6 dimensions of job quality that are kind of overlaid on the roles that are created to ensure that it's actually a good job. But before we start, I really wanted to give a little bit more background, and I'm sure some of you will be very familiar with these. My apologies, my screen isn't shifting. So what I might do is just stop sharing and I'll reshare again. Apologies. And let's see if that will work. Yes, it does. Excellent. Thank you. So what are the current statistics on the employment of people with disability in Australia? And this is from the March 30 Employment Job and Skills Australia Employment and Disability in Australia report. And again,
Elaine, it's just Liv
yes.
here. I'm so sorry. We actually can't see your slides just yet.
Okay. Let me just
correctly.
Okay, apologies. I'll just let's have another go. Right. I think what's actually happened is, can we have just a little bit of time? And what I'll do is I will exit and go back to the slides again. Apologies, we did actually practice this, didn't we, Liv?
We did. I was going to say, I've got them up here as well. If you'd like me to just do it, pop them up for you, and I can change them as we go along.
Actually, that might be better if you don't mind. Let's do that because it can take a little bit of time, and I don't want to waste people's time either. Okay, thank you very much, Liv. So if we can have the next slide, please. Great. So in 2022, this is the latest ABS statistics, 2.7 million Australians aged within that workforce group of 15 to 64 had a disability. This is around 16.1% of the population in that age group. And 60.5% were in the workforce compared to 84.9% of people without disability. So again, we're seeing this over 20% gap, which seems to be quite persistent. Importantly, also 7.5% of people with disability who are in that age cohort tended to fit in that long-term unemployed rate. And the long-term unemployed rate is 104 weeks or more, compared to 3.1% for those people without disabilities. Interestingly, and I think this is an interesting statistic, but it depends how you define job ready, is that over 260,000 people were saying they were job ready but not employed. Thanks, Liv. Next screen. We also know from the literature that employing people with disabilities is well established in the literature to be extremely good for everybody. It's not only good for the person with disability, their community and society, exceptionally good for GDP, Australia's GDP, but it's also really, really good for organisations and employers. When I was doing my own literature review, I found over 30, 40 years of research globally that basically said employing people with intellectual disability is really good for business for a range of reasons. Going from job retention to increased loyalty, reduced staff absenteeism. It is particularly good for teams and also for culture as well. So this is something that's well established in the literature, and I'm sure you use it every day when you're talking as an employment consultant to employers in terms of why they should open up opportunities for people with disability. And we also know from the literature that there's a central importance of senior leadership in employment. If the senior leaders are on board, it's a lot easier to get people with disability within the organisation. And I suppose in addition to that, we also know that you might have senior leaders on board, but this might not necessarily flow through to the operational leaders, to the co-workers and teams. So there is a little bit of a disconnect there. What we do know is that leaders and managers need business-oriented reasons for employing people with disability. And one of the things that I'm hoping to give you today are some other reasons that you can talk to employees about that they probably will know a lot about in terms of their operations. So we know that job carving is exceptionally good for people with disabilities, but it also happens to be exceptionally good for employers. Next screen, Liv. So what are the drivers of job carving and job redesign from an employer or demand side? Well, it's this concept of role overload. I mean, what is role overload? It's similar to job creep in that you will start with a role and then slowly but surely over time, gradually that role accumulates other tasks. And it happens to be one of the major reasons that companies of all sizes in Australia, from small sizes, less than 20 employees, to medium, over 20 to 200, to large organisations, are actually really considering redesigning roles. They know, for example, that role overload is unsustainable. And it's quite interesting that when we look at the skilled technicians in the business, the architects in an architectural business, the soft load engineers in a mechanical and engineering business, the therapist in the therapy business, that quite often they're the roles that have these gradual accumulation of tasks. And it's actually really unsustainable. It's very, very bad for business. It can affect customers in for-profit organisations because they're not getting what they want to get, and it can really affect high turnover. We also know, and this is, I think, extremely interesting, is that role overload is now a psychosocial hazard in the workplace. So it's recognised at the Commonwealth and national level and in work and health and safety legislation that role overload is a psychosocial risk that employers must actively manage. And because it's in the national framework, it also filters down to all of the states and territories frameworks as well. So redesigning roles is not only a wellbeing initiative for organisations, but it's also a risk management strategy. There are many boards that are of organisations and companies that are actually looking at redesigning roles as a risk management strategy because of the impact of role overload. Next slide, thanks, Liv. The other reason, and look, there were several reasons that I could have chosen from an employer side as to what role redesign or job carving is a really good idea. But one of the other reasons is skills shortages. And it's forcing more intentional role design from employers. They simply can't hire another person. And when we look at, say, for example, the therapy business or the disability sector, what we actually see there is that we might see therapists who are the technicians with the business, but they're also getting all of these other jobs carved into them. But also it's very, very difficult for therapy business to actually get more OTs, to get more speechies and so on. Those people simply aren't there. And instead, companies are actually asking these sorts of questions. What tasks truly require specialist skills? And some of you will know that these are brilliant job carving questions as well. What tasks can be redistributed or carved out? What tasks are unnecessary or duplicative? And how can we redesign roles to attract and retain talent? So it's not just about ensuring that you're getting talent, but it's also about retaining them as well. So what we're moving away from, or what organisations are moving away from, is less about headcount planning, that is replacing one FTE with another FTE, and moving much more towards capability-based planning. And this is driving a shift towards this task-based role design. And the job creation matrix is really a task-based role design process. Oh, next slide. Thank you. So what is the good job creation matrix? And I'll go through that now. Thank you, Liv. The good job creation matrix, and this is why and what, is a structured approach to job carving, job redesign, and job creation for all roles that senior leaders and employers want to consider. So it can create one or multiple roles. So in your conversations with employers, and you might be an employer yourself thinking about this, is that you'll kind of get a sense of, are you going to start with one job or are you going to start with multiple jobs? It might be in a small company of less than 20 roles that you're thinking about the whole company, and it might be in a medium-sized enterprise, which is often the place where jobs can be created quite easily, just because of the nature of the size of the employer. You might be having conversations about a business unit, or maybe a small business unit or a large business unit to kick off. But in that way, it can create one or multiple roles. The matrix is also a decision-making tool that should be understood by managers. They're often taught matrices like this matrix, a 2x2 with 4 quadrants, are often taught in management courses. They can be in MBA classes, for example, and there's some really famous matrices. There's the GE matrix and the Eisenhower matrix. They're really good tools for enabling managers to make decisions. And because by creating meaningful jobs with varying layers of complexity and importance, and we'll get into that shortly, organisations can improve their efficiency of their core business task and reduce role overload. So you can take some of those tasks off the technicians within organisations. Quite often those people are the reasons why the organisation exists. So if you can take some of those tasks off those people that they no longer need to do, you can actually increase efficiency, productivity, potentially within the organisation. And the job matrix also provides the type of information, the sort of information to senior leadership and employers, which gives them a practical pathway forward and highlights the benefits to their organisation. Thanks, Liv. Next one. So what is the matrix? So the good job creation matrix categorises jobs tasks based on 2 main factors, complexity and importance. So the idea really is that if, for example, you have a business unit that the employer wants to look at role redesign, you would get the job descriptions or the role descriptions from each of those roles, and you would extract the tasks from each of those job descriptions. And so it looks at it based on these 2 main factors, complexity and importance. Well, what is complexity and what is importance? Complexity are often tasks that are complex. They require a level of skill around them. They might be a task that has multiple tasks within one task. It might, for example, require someone with a lot more experience in a particular field. An important task is a task that needs to be done pretty much straight away. If it's a crisis task, an urgent task, it needs to be done straight away. The interesting thing is that quite often importance will outweigh complexity in organisations, because if something needs to be done, it needs to be done quickly, regardless of how complex it is. The matrix, as I said, is a 2x2. It's broken up into 4 quadrants, and each quadrant represents a different type of task that can then be bundled into jobs and into roles. Thanks, Liv. So here's the matrix. As you will see at the bottom, at the vertical at the bottom, we've got relative task importance. And in the vertical going upwards, we've got relative task complexity. Well, you might ask a really good question, what do you mean by relative? And that's because the tasks that you extract from role descriptions, they'll be complex or important relative to other tasks. So it's got this sense of relative, and it's also got this sense of being almost a subjective view of each of those tasks, depending on the group of people that you're working with in terms of doing this job. And we'll go to that shortly in the next slide about how to do it. But let's start in the lower left quadrant. These are tasks that are judged to be, and judged is that group of people or whoever are being involved in this process, of relative low complexity and relative low importance. These can be assessed as being entry-level positions, or they might simply be jobs that are relative low complexity and relative low importance, but they still need to be done. Often these are the ones in organisations where they're not done, things really do fall over quite quickly. So these are low complexity, low importance, but they need to be done. And you could say they could be entry-level positions for people with disability that maybe haven't been in the workplace or maybe don't have any other skill to bring to this particular sector and industry. If we then go up to the top right quadrant, we're dealing with tasks which are judged to be a relative high complexity and relative high importance. These are quite often where your senior technicians are. So they're the architects in the architect business. They're the CEOs of organisations. They're the people whose tasks really are of quite often the reason why the organisation exists in the first place, or they're leading the organisation. They're your skilled technicians. And as I was talking about previously, there also happen to be the role where sometimes role overload can really stop the business from getting on with its core business. If we then move across to the upper left, we've got tasks that are judged to be a relative high complexity and relative low importance. Now, these can be things like the complex data entry. It doesn't have to be done today or maybe even next week or next month, but it has to be done. And there's a layer of complexity about it. Maybe it requires a different skill, or maybe it requires more experience to actually do that job. And if we then go to the lower right quadrant, these are tasks judged to be of relative high importance, but relative low complexity. And some examples from hospitality, although can I say there's examples from every industry and sector which fits this quadrant, are room attendants, for example, in a hotel. Now, these jobs really need to be done. They're not necessarily complex. They probably have some really clear routine tasks that can be mapped out. But there's a level of urgency about it. They need to be done for the customer who's next to come into that room. And quite often it's that switch over time between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. in the afternoon where a lot of rooms have to be cleaned and attended to be right for the customer. But there's a time frame within that. So as you can see, we've got these four quadrants. The interesting thing about creating career pathways is that you can start in the lower left, or you can move up to the upper right, the upper left, sorry, or you can go from the lower left to the lower right, or you can go across, etc. So the career pathway that you could use with the matrix depends really on the individual, but you've then got role descriptions that you've then got tasks that are bundled up into role descriptions that can create a meaningful pathway and potentially be put in people's performance development plans, depending on what they would like to do within the organisation. Next one, Liv. So how do you implement it? Well, the first thing you need to do really is choose the area. And that will come from the employer, perhaps in conversation with you. You might sit side by side with the employer in terms of, well, where do you want to start and how do we want to start? And then you would assemble the job descriptions in relation to that. The next thing that you would do is assemble the team. Now, quite often, if it's a larger group, bringing together the impacted employees, HR, management, and preferably people, I think in this space, preferably people with lived experience is really critical as well, if that's something that the employer would be open to and listen to. We've then got auditing of all tasks. So list every task. And what's really important here is listing the tasks that actually don't get done, and they're not in anybody's job description. And we all know those. Those are tasks that exist. They're not in anybody's job description, but they still really need to be done. And a really good question to ask here is, what doesn't get done but needs to? In fact, that's a really good question overall to ask employers, what's not getting done but actually needs to get done. We can then map those tasks to one of those quadrants based on their level of complexity and level of importance. And if it's a broader group, you would reach consensus. You would try and reach consensus in any event. And perhaps it's a facilitated process as well, depending on how large it is. You would then bundle, step 4, bundle those tasks into roles. And it would be group tasks into coherent positions. And this is where really the next step, applying the quality lens, comes in as well. When you're thinking about, are they full-time, are they part-time, or are they shared positions for maximum job quality? Because the other thing that we're doing is ensuring that these jobs really meet the strategic objectives of the organisation as well. So we need to map, and then we need to cross-check in terms of strategic directions of the organisation. Applying the job quality lens is the next step. So we filter every new role through those 6 dimensions of job quality, and we'll go into that shortly, ensuring that pay is fair, terms are secure, and the work is meaningful. We then embed these in performance plans because, again, we're talking about career progression pathways. Next slide, Liv. So what are the 6 dimensions of job quality? We've got pay and other rewards. What does this role in terms of its classification? What does that actually look like? Is it an administrative role? You know, what are the award wages here? Those kinds of questions fit into that area. Intrinsic characteristics of work. Well, we've created a job, but is it meaningful actually? And does it have a career pathway? If people would like that, that's important too. Terms of employment, is it part-time? Is it full-time? Is it shared? This also comes in with one of the other dimensions, work-life balance. Do we have flexibility? We know how important workplace flexibility is for, what I say, most people nowadays, and certainly for people with disabilities. Having capacity to work from home and having just flexibility in your work arrangements is really important. Health and safety, is this embedded, and representation and voice? In this particular model, representation and voice is seen to be really critical for people. It's a part of having that sense of belonging and also having a sense of empowerment, trust, autonomy within the work that you do. So representation and voice could be being able to join a union. It may look different in different employment settings and different industries and sectors, but it is important. Next slide, Liv. So the benefits of implementing the matrix are really these enhanced workflows across the organisation. You're taking tasks off roles where those tasks really don't belong and could create an opportunity for other people, but just this whole concept of redesign. For the employer, you're reducing role overload, but you're also potentially increasing the capacity to be an employer of choice. So when you're looking in those skills shortages area, it may well be that your experienced people are seeing this and going, okay, I can spend 80% of my time on my core tasks. I'm not, as I'm doing in my current workplace, spending a lot of time in other spaces. It increases productivity and gains efficiencies, which is about that focus on core responsibilities and essential roles, provides a clear career progression for all employees, really, positions the employer as an employer of choice, as I said before, and adds to that strategic employment initiative, that some of the senior leaders who are going, we want to employ people with disability, it actually also enables that strategic employment leading to workplace inclusion. Thanks, Liv. So these next few slides are about putting it into practice. And this is a hypothetical case study. Now, I've called this organisation No Name Therapy because after a significant amount of searching for a name for a hypothetical place, I could not find one. So I thought, who is going to call their company No Name? And hence I've landed on No Name Therapy. No Name Therapy is a medium-sized multidisciplinary clinic that wants to walk the talk. So it's got physio, OT and speech, wants to walk the talk in terms of employing people with disability because they know it's important to mirror the community that they serve in their business anyway. They've realised that clinicians are burnt out, this is the upper right quadrant, by low complexity tasks that are essential but do not require a university degree. They decided to use the job creation matrix to reimagine and realign their organisation to ensure their focus on their core objectives, providing therapy, and to redesign their existing role descriptions to mirror this, as well as create positions and career pathways for people with disabilities. Thanks, Liv. So how do they go about it? How the matrix was applied. They had a stakeholder workshop. So they gathered all the relevant job descriptions to map all the current tasks, included the undocumented tasks. So here we go back to this question, what is not getting done around here but needs to? Really important question. Again, those are the things that aren't in people's jobs descriptions necessarily. They just get given to someone, but they need to be done. They then did the quadrant mapping exercise. So each task was discussed and consensus was reached on its relative importance and complexity and was placed in the appropriate quadrant. And then further discussion ensued. The map tasks were then bundled into jobs, and the 6 dimensions of job quality were applied. So the newly created jobs were then discussed using the 6 dimensions of job quality lens. And again, if you wanted to, you could quite easily use the job quality lens at the role bundling stage as well, because it kind of gives you some idea about whether it's going to be part-time, full-time, flexible, how many roles do we have here. So in and of itself, it could be a tool that you could utilize to create jobs in more fuller, create jobs in ways in which you're ticking those boxes earlier on. Next slide, thanks, Lou. So here again, I've just presented to you the 6 dimensions of job quality that can be overlaid with the job creation matrix. So what are the examples of tasks that were created from positions that were bundled to create new jobs? So this things like room preparation. So for example, I know from a very good source that sometimes clinic rooms are not used because there's no one there to clean them. There's no one there to sanitize the toys that were previously used and the setting up of sensory tools. Now this is quite often something that the therapist does, but they don't necessarily need to. It's simply a matter of laying out the instructions. Okay, this is what needs to be done. I'm seeing this child next. These are the tools that need to be laid out, and so on. Sanitizing equipment is a really big thing, even in other organisations, like, for example, organisations that provide first aid lessons. The masks that are used on the dummies have to be sanitized, and it can take some time to do that, and it's a job that can be done by somebody else. Maybe they're coming in through an entry-level position. Tech sync. We know that lots of therapists and lots of therapy businesses are filming exercise videos or filming particular things that they really want to share with their online community. And someone needs to film, someone needs to edit, and that can be a lovely task in terms of, creating the skill, developing the skill set that could move from an entry-level role into a much more complex role, moving upwards through that left quadrant. Resource creation is another one. Laminating visual aids and communication boards. They need to be done if the therapists are going on home visits. They'll also have a basket of stuff they'll need to take with them, and it would be lamination, communication boards, etc. Intake prep. Things need to be done there, and additional administrative positions. You can see here that the positions that I'm creating are really probably those lower left positions in some respects, but they can also be positions that can be bundled in ways that have more complexity and more importance, therefore creating career pathways. And those are things like case note filing, customer liaison. Now, we know that AI presents an issue around sometimes are used around customer liaison, checking that the family are home or that the people are coming in to the clinic, but having a human face doing it. In fact, many of these jobs actually require humans to do them. Thanks, Liv. So I think this is a really good slide, and it was Liv who actually suggested this one. How do I bring this to employers? Well, every situation is different. Your relationship that you have, we know how important relationships are. in everything that we do, and building relationships with the employers, and I know you're probably spending a lot of time in, is really critical. And you will have a sense of the context and you would have a sense of the employer. But leaders and managers will also hopefully be familiar with this 2x2 matrix in terms of being a decision-making tool. So you can sit side by side and kind of work through the matrix, and it would make sense potentially to most managers and leaders. It's practical, sets out the steps, and hopefully, potentially solves a problem that the employer is actually facing, which is, I guess, really key. We have this idea of role overload. We have this idea of skills shortages in particular industries and sectors. Let's have a discussion with it, and maybe we can bring out the matrix to have that conversation. And the way in is really to show how it will help the business. So thank you, Simon. I've completed. Yeah. Oh, I'll stop sharing. My apologies. Oh, that's Liv. Thanks, Liv. Thanks for doing that, Liv. Appreciate it.
No worries.
Oh, you're on mute, Simon. Sorry.
Okay, Run, now's your chance to pop a question into the Q&A function in the chat. So just on the bottom strip there, pop a question into that Q&A function if you have one.
I'm seeing some lovely hands and hearts come up. That's always lovely.
So there's one that we've just popped into the chat in general there, Elaine. So can you please provide more information about how you speak with employers about the matrix? So are they encouraged to look at all the tasks, or do you guide them through it?
Look, that's a really good question. So thank you very much for it. I guess when you're talking with employers, and I'm assuming that the first step really is establishing the relationship with the employer. And I'm sure many of you would know that, how you sort of find a way in terms of job creation and role redesign. And because many employers are facing this concept of role overload and skills shortages, they're very likely to be open to these sort of conversations that you would have. So when you're having those conversations, you could also have conversations about where you start. And you may well be working with employers at the moment who want to start in a particular place, i.e., we're in an architectural business. The architects have got way too many tasks that are clicked onto them. We think that these are the sorts of tasks that we have. And then you could potentially, depending on the size of the organisation, and look, you'd be led by the employers as well, well, look, here's the tool, here's the matrix. And what's the best way of us approaching this together? We could look at some of those job descriptions, we can extract some of the tasks, and we can do it together. We can locate some of those tasks both on complexity and importance in one of those quadrants. Now, it may be that from time to time you're not really sure, that it may be something that's more of a guess than that's something that you can be definite on. But you've got to start somewhere. It's a bit like, when you're doing anything, starting somewhere is sometimes a good place to start. And it might be that you start and you go, not sure we've got it right. Let's have another go. And so there might be variable ways that you can do it, and a number of tasks, and a number of ways of doing it, depending on the employer and the context, etc. But I think the key thing is to start, get the right people around the table, extract the tasks, and start having a conversation. It is always going to be a subjective thing. It's not going to be an exact science, but that's okay because there's not many things that are. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Elaine. We'll move on to the next question. So David puts in the chat in here around what role can wage subsidies have play in helping secure employment. Did you test wage subsidies at all in relation to the conversations that you were having around the matrix?
Yeah, no, I haven't tested wage subsidies, but I think that would be a really good thing to test. Because the other thing that I wanted to let people know about as well, and I think Olivia might share my details, is that I would love to have this tested in a range of different industries and sectors. So, I'm up for being contacted and let's have a good discussion. Let's see how this actually works in some industries and sectors in different ways, and maybe how this works in terms of the conversation around wage subsidies as well.
Okay, next question. So, um, what do you do when employers are stuck that they have set position descriptions? How do we work backwards? So, I think you kind of went into some of that. So, I think this would be if you have that job creation matrix, it's kind of a formal way to unpick some of those and start that conversation around, this is a formal way that we could start to unpick some of that.
Yeah, and also that's a really good point, Simon. And also, I think so sometimes one of the barriers which came up in my own research was HR can sometimes be a barrier because if you've got medium to larger organisations, there can be a lot of rigidity around job descriptions, and I'm sure some of you have experienced that. And I'm hoping that when we've got this senior leadership commitment, because we know the research tells us that having them on board is really, really critical, that when we've actually got that, we can actually open it up and start a discussion. So yeah. So I just see Lydia's comment. I used to work in HR where this was a big issue and thoughts, breaking down that rigidity. And look, it's understandable because when you do something, when an organisation runs in a particular way for a long period of time, it is difficult sometimes to be agile and pivot. But I do think that's why I presented those couple of slides on role overload, because I actually think that's becoming more of an issue for employers, especially now it's a psychosocial hazard. So if you're working in a company and you are subjected to role overload, you can ring Safe Work SA if you're in South Australia and say, I'm being subjected to role overload. And my understanding is Safe Work SA, depending on the content of the information, needs to run an investigation on that. So boards, for example, of companies are becoming much more aware that this psychosocial hazard is actually an organisational risk, not just a wellbeing initiative. So that could be a way in with HR because they would be familiar with the work health and safety legislation as well.
We do only have, I think, 3 minutes left, so probably time for this one last question. Elaine, are you happy if people want to follow up with you with their specific questions if we don't get to them, for them to email them direct?
Most definitely. Thank you, Simon.
No worries. So we'll just do this one last question is where can we find more information about tangible business case related ROI benefits that can be used to pitch to organisational leadership?
I think that that's a really good question, and thank you very much for asking it. I think part of it is about perhaps having you guys as being some of those discussions as well. The feedback that I got when I tested it was that it was a really good tool, and that came from HR managers and those middle level managers. But I don't have a lot of research evidence to date. So this is also about the conversation is let's get some research evidence together. And I guess I'm putting down the gauntlet to get some people on board to sort of come and do that work.
Okay, so that probably draws us to a close, Dr. Nash. So thank you, Elaine. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. Another fantastic session. Huge number of questions in the chat, which hopefully those that have asked them, seeing we didn't get to them, if you can just direct those straight to Dr. Nash and she'll get back to you. For those of you who are attended, who are DEA members, don't forget to claim your CPD points. You can do that via the website. And I just need to let everyone know that there won't be a DEA-led lunch and learn in the next couple of weeks due to our DEA conference, which is kicking off next week. So on behalf of DEA and the Centre for Inclusive Employment, thank you very much for your attendance today. We look forward to seeing you on July the 1st, which will be our next lunch and learn session. So thank you very much again, Dr. Nash.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Lovely.